For some people who might be new to the show or might have just come across a video or the channel and might be confused as to why, with all that's going on and how crazy the Republicans are, why I spend so much time criticizing the Democrats. And there are many reasons I can give as to why that is, but the biggest overarching reason is the Democratic Party is largely responsible for the current state of affairs on any number of crisis level issues. And the people who talk about news and politics, whether it's the mainstream media or your friends and family on social media, nobody ever wants to acknowledge this. And it's contributing to this deep partisanship in this country where if you're on the right, all the problems are the Democrats' fault, and if you're on the left, all the problems are the Republicans' fault. But the truth is, nobody's hands are clean here, and I have the perfect story to prove that point. So over the last few days, there have been a number of votes that have taken place in the House and in the Senate about the upcoming National Defense Authorization Act, which is basically the Pentagon budget and the budget for the entire national security apparatus. One of the things that has been voted on over the last few days in the House and in the Senate was an amendment proposed by some progressives like Bernie Sanders and AOC and Ro Khanna to cut the Pentagon budget 10%, so 10% out of the $740 billion annual budget for the Pentagon. They propose cutting 10% of that for the next year, and which would be about $74 billion. And they propose using that money to fund more and better testing here in the United States, to fund a universal mask program to provide masks to everybody in the country, since that is the most effective way to limit the transmission of the coronavirus. And they were supposed to put some of the money towards treatment and therapeutics and a vaccine and things like that. Now, I did a video earlier, about a week or so ago, where I criticized this weak sauce proposal because, let's get real now, cutting only 10% of the Pentagon budget, I agree with the sentiment behind the idea. Yes, we should take that money and we should use it here at home, especially at a time of crisis, but only 10%, that's nowhere near as much as we should cut. We should cut way more than that. Anything that's in the budget that isn't going towards the healthcare of troops and veterans, and it isn't going towards payrolls and benefits and things like that, should be cut by at least 60%, 70%, maybe even more than that. If there is any place you want to make a giant cut in a government spending, you should start at the Pentagon, because that money is being wasted to fund and prop up the military-industrial complex and to continue these endless, illegal, and immoral wars that we're fighting all over the world. But that's not what was voted on. That wasn't the proposal. The proposal was to cut just 10%, a measly 10%, and to take the Pentagon budget back to the levels that it was just about a year or two ago. Nothing drastic, nothing major. Even that was too much for the corporate Democrats who are in the pocket of the military-industrial complex. Even that was too much to cut from the Pentagon and spend here at home at a time of crisis. I mean, the majority of Democrats in the Senate voted against this, and the overwhelming majority in the House voted against this amendment. There is no other way to describe this other than incredibly, insanely corrupt, immoral, and honestly, this is just downright evil on so many different levels. Let's take the deadly global pandemic that's ripping through the country and the unprecedented economic crisis, and let's remove that from the conversation for a second. And that's even a silly thing to do because those things are such huge parts of the discussion. But let's take it out for a second. After all we know about what our military has been doing overseas for decades. We knew the Iraq War was a lie. We knew the Afghanistan War was a lie. In fact, with the Afghanistan War, just a year ago, the Afghanistan papers came out. We learned that the military leaders, the only people in the country who are telling us we need to stay in Afghanistan, we learned from their own words, by their own admission, their own quotes, that they have no idea who the enemy is in Afghanistan. They have no idea what the objective is in Afghanistan. And we're just bombing and massacring innocent civilians in the country aimlessly with no end goal in sight. That's their own admission, the admission of generals, colonels, people in the highest levels of the White House and the State Department. That's what the lessons learned interviews that were leaked in the Washington Post, that known as the Pentagon paper, the Afghanistan papers. That's what we learned from that. And still, the Democrats are saying, I don't care. I'm not going to look into this at all. This doesn't raise any red flags for me. We're going to continue to give hundreds of billions of dollars every year to fund this war in Afghanistan. I mean, how does that not shake you? How does that not move you to radically be anti-war and against this entire war on terror after we learned what we learned in the Afghanistan papers? It's incredible. And it's not just Iraq and Afghanistan, it's Syria. We learned over the last year or two, there have been many people to come out, whistleblowers, to come out and expose the white helmets and expose this, what looks like an elaborate CIA and State Department conspiracy where they are, them and their allies on the ground in Syria are setting off chemical weapons, killing innocent civilians so they can use that as a justification to overthrow the Assad government. We're there in Syria right now. Donald Trump has said we're there to secure the oil. So we're illegally occupying a country to steal their oil. This is just the admissions from the last year. The entire premise of being in Syria was, we have to get rid of Assad. He's a terrible dictator and all this stuff. Entirely illegal, unconstitutional, wasn't voted on by Congress and wasn't approved by the UN. Our involvement there is illegal and it's a war crime, full stop. What the Democrats' response to that? Let's just give some more a blank fucking check to the war in Syria, and we'll continue to bump up the Pentagon budget. I mean, and not even to mention the war in Yemen, the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet. Destroy the country's infrastructure, destroy the healthcare system. Most of the hospitals in the country aren't even operational because the Saudis, and with our help and the help of the UAE, have bombed the shit out of the hospitals, the marketplaces, the schools, infrastructure in Yemen. We've also learned that there's of course, since the beginning, there's been a blockade. We're not allowing food and medicine into the country. This is all being funded by the NDAA. This is all being funded by the Pentagon budget that was just voted on. No qualms about it. Let's continue to do it. We're funding Al-Qaeda with this same money that the House and the Senate, the Democrats agreed with the Republicans to fund. With this same money, we're funding jihadists in Syria, in Iraq, and in Yemen. We are directly giving weapons to Al-Qaeda in Yemen with this same money. And to the majority of the Democratic Party, none of this stuff makes them bat an eyelash. None of this stuff makes them flinch. None of this stuff makes them question whether or not we should be giving hundreds of billions of dollars, ultimately trillions of dollars, a blank check to the military-industrial complex to wage endless war all around the world. It doesn't give them a moment of pause because they all voted to continue this again for the however many time. And then when you add in what's actually going on in the United States right now, it's even more inexcusable that the majority of the Democratic Party chose to just use all this money for endless war to prop up the military-industrial complex with this corporatism, because that's what all this is for, to give money to Raytheon and Boeing to build more missiles and tanks and weapons for our military to use in their imperialist actions around the world. That's what all this comes down to. And while pandemic, where we don't have a functioning healthcare system and an economic crisis, the likes of which we've never seen in this country before, while all of that's going on, the Democrats have an option. I'm not even saying, oh, we're just completely going to get rid of the Pentagon budget and use that money to do the to fight the coronavirus and the economic crisis. That wasn't even what they were voting on. It was a simple amendment to take just 10%, to take $74 billion out of a $740 billion budget and use that money for, like I said, to improve and expand the testing in the United States and to fund a universal mask program to provide masks to everybody in the country, and for therapeutics and other treatments of the of the coronavirus and other domestic priorities. You couldn't even spare $74 billion from the Pentagon budget to fund those things. How immoral is that? And so the Democrats, you have no leg to stand on. I mean, that's been true from the beginning of this crisis, but it's been nothing but nonstop. Oh, look at Trump. Look at the Republicans. Look at how they failed us during this time of pandemic and economic crisis. They aren't doing anything on behalf of the regular people. I don't want to hear any more Democrats making that case, because you also had an option to change the course of our response to this crisis. You also had an opportunity to fund universal masks, which you are going around saying is what's going to limit the spread of this virus. You had an option to fund that, and you didn't. And in fact, you chose to fund endless war over those priorities. So I don't want to hear any more virtue signaling and partisan hackery trying to make it seem like it's just the Republicans who are insanely corrupt. It's just the Republicans who are actively screwing over the regular working class people on behalf of the corporations. Because this budget, this vote, giving $740 billion for endless war to commit war crimes to massacre innocent civilians. At a time like this, you don't have a right to criticize Trump and say he's fucked this up, because you fucked it up just as much. I mean, this is unreal. This is unreal. And people are still going to come out and tell you, you have no choice but to vote for the Democrats. You have to vote for the Democrats. Look at what it got us. Look at what it's getting us. Nothing but corporate bailouts. And when they had a chance to vote to cut the Pentagon budget just a small amount on something that they wouldn't even notice, take it back to what the levels were just a year or two ago, even that was too much for the corporate Democrats in the pocket of the military-industrial complex, in the pocket of Raytheon and Boeing and all the defense contractors who make a fucking killing off these endless wars. It was too much for them. So they decided, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to fund universal masks, even though that would drastically cut the amount of cases during this pandemic. I'm not going to use this to fund some kind of economic relief like a UBI or rent cancellation, debt cancellation in this country. Nope. We're just going to use this for endless war, point blank period. And at the same time, they're going to tell us we don't have money for Medicare for all. In a global pandemic, they're going to tell us we don't have money for Medicare for all. Joe Biden's going to come out and tell me if it even passes the House and the Senate when he's president, he's going to fucking veto it. That's what they're telling us. They're out here trying to means test any and every economic relief they try to, whatever crumbs they give to regular people. Even they won't just make it a universal thing. They try to means test it. And why? Because they say we don't have enough money. We always have enough money for endless war. We always have enough money to prop up the military-industrial complex. Those are our priorities. And it's the priorities of both the Democrats and the Republicans. And that's what people need to understand. It's whether you're not going, there will be no change if you vote for the Democrats or if you vote for the Republicans. It's just going to be same shit, different day. New boss, same as the old boss, and nothing is going to change. So we're going to learn that lesson the hard way if and when Joe Biden wins this election and he becomes the president. Because then the Democrats are going to have the House, the White House, they're going to have the House, and they might even have the Senate. And then we'll continue to see more shit like this. We'll continue to see more budgets more blank checks in the military-industrial complex, and at the same time, they're gonna try to cut whatever they can in the social safety net and leave people out to dry. We're gonna see that from the Democrats, and just like we are from the Republicans. So, mark my words, this is what's gonna happen, and this vote is a clear picture of what you can expect from the Democratic Party if they take back control of government.